Her daughter sent a lift after her biopsy. Her son-in-law forwarded a gift bag, tissues, soup, and silence. 3 weeks later, they found out they'd been removed from the will. "You're punishing us," Lisa said, voice brittle. Melanie looked up from the signed trust. "I'm preserving myself. This isn't revenge. It's the legacy you built by not showing up." "Wait, before we go any further, I gotta ask, where are you watching from? Drop it in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe." "They dropped me at the curb after surgery. My coat wasn't even zipped." The lift idled too close to the fire lane. The driver kept the engine running, eyes flicking toward the rearview mirror as Melanie opened the car door with her free hand and braced herself on the doorframe with the other. The seatbelt had pressed against her biopsy bandage the entire ride. Now even breathing had corners. She stepped out slowly, one foot, then the other. Her coat sagged open, her scarf sliding halfway down her shoulder. The air bit hard. Late fall, east wind, unforgiving. The driver nodded once, then sped off before she'd reached the stairs. She looked down at the gift bag swinging from her wrist. Tissues, chicken noodle soup, a small card with the word "Brave" in gold foil. No note. The third stair always creaked. The sixth was chipped. She counted them in her head like they might anchor her. 12 total, 12 chances to fall. When she reached the top, her key shook in the lock. Inside, the apartment smelled like eucalyptus and old books. Melanie leaned against the door for a moment before locking it behind her. She kicked off her shoes and walked gingerly to the couch. The biopsy site throbbed, shallow and deep at the same time, like her body couldn't decide how badly it had been violated. On the kitchen counter sat the mug Lisa had given her last Christmas. Best Nana ever. It was still dusty. She hadn't had the energy for sentimentality this week. She opened the gift bag and pulled out the soup. Canned, not homemade. The expiration date read next year, as if shelf life could substitute for care. Her phone buzzed. Group text from Lisa. "Hope everything went okay? We're tied up with the kids, but thinking of you. No follow-up, no call, just punctuation." Melanie didn't respond. Instead, she walked to the small wooden cabinet near her bookshelf, the one she'd labeled years ago with color-coded tape. Medical, legal, estate. She opened the middle drawer. Inside were 3 manila folders. She pulled out a fresh one, wrote in black ink across the tab, Plan B. Then she reached for the discharge paperwork, the consent forms, the scan reports, and slid them inside one by one. Her hands were steadier than expected. Later, she sat on her recliner in the living room, a blanket around her knees and a heating pad under her ribs. The TV played a baking show no one in her family would ever finish with her. She watched it anyway. She ate crackers. She didn't finish the soup. By 9:47 p.m., the silence in the room had grown roots. Then her phone pinged. Voicemail. She hadn't heard it ring. She opened the app, pressed play. "Hi, this is Erin from Dr. Geller's office. Melanie, we got the preliminary results back from pathology and we really need you to call us first thing tomorrow morning. It's important." Click. The room stayed still. Melanie didn't cry. She didn't panic. She just looked down at her own hands. They didn't feel like hers anymore. She reached over, picked up her journal from the side table, the one with the indented corner and coffee stain from February. She opened to the first blank page and wrote, "They sent me home alone. I won't forget that." Then she turned out the light. The screen on her phone dims, just as another voicemail icon appears. Same number, same urgency. The tumor was small, their absence was massive. Melanie woke before sunrise, though she hadn't really slept. The second voicemail had looped in her dreams. Erin's voice, soft but tight, like it was holding something back. She brewed weak coffee and sat by the window while the sky turned gray. No appetite, just the heaviness of a call she couldn't unmake. At 8:01 a.m. she dialed. "Hi, it's Melanie Rivers. I got a message from Erin yesterday. From Dr. Geller's office?" The receptionist transferred her immediately. No small talk. Erin's voice came through. "Hi, Melanie. Thanks for calling. The pathology results came back. It's early stage 1A breast cancer, hormone positive. That's the good news." Melanie didn't answer. She waited. The good news? she asked quietly. There's no lymph node involvement. We caught it early. It's treatable. There was a pause. Then Melanie said the thing that had been clawing at the back of her throat since the first voicemail. If I did nothing, if I chose not to treat it, how long? On the other end, Aaron hesitated. Let's not go there. Melanie looked out the window. The wind had picked up, last of the leaves scraping across the pave. I went there, she said. You don't have to. After the call, she sat for a long time, phone in hand, as if it might ask her something else. Her fingers moved without thinking. She opened her messages. Lisa sent 10:23 a.m. Hope it's nothing serious. We're swamped with soccer and school stuff. Keep us posted? Melanie stared at the bubble, typed a single sentence. It's cancer. She hit send, then she waited. For 5 minutes. For an hour. For a day and a half. Nothing. By the time 36 hours had passed, Melanie had already reread the message so many times it stopped feeling like her own words. Just syllables orbiting a silence. She didn't follow up. Instead, she opened the filing cabinet again. The folder marked Medical Proxy. Lisa had always been there. Practical. Assumed. Wrong. She took it out, uncapped a pen, and drew a diagonal line through her daughter's name. Then she made a sticky note. To be reassigned. Immediately. That night, the apartment was dim except for a desk lamp in the corner. Melanie sat cross-legged on the floor, sorting through piles of paperwork, Post-its, and a decade of misplaced boundaries. She pulled out her leather-bound journal, the one Lisa gave her 6 birthdays ago and never asked about since. She flipped to a fresh page. At the top she wrote in sharp black ink, "Ignored isn't neutral." Underneath, a list began to form. September 14th, no call after biopsy. October 3rd, lift home alone. October 5th, hope it's nothing serious. October 6th through 7th, 36 hours of silence after it's cancer. She closed the book, pressed her palm flat against the cover like she was sealing something in. The silence around her didn't ache anymore. It clarified. She went to the kitchen and poured herself a glass of water, cool and sharp. Just as she turned off the light, her phone rang. Celeste? Mobile. She smiled faintly, answering on the second ring. Hey, stranger, she said. Celeste's voice was brisk, kind, and knowing. I saw your text. You're really doing this? Melanie nodded, even though Celeste couldn't see her. I am. Then let me say this loud and clear. If you're changing beneficiaries, do it now. Don't wait for anyone to disappoint you twice. Melanie looked down at the folder still open on the table. I've already been disappointed for the last time. Celeste says, you're going to need a new agent for everything. Who do you trust to hold your pen? She didn't want to drive me to chemo. I didn't want her name on the house. The conference room smelled like citrus and printer ink. Celeste's law office was modest, no towering leather chairs or floor-to-ceiling windows, just a solid oak table and a woman who had known Melanie long enough to read her silences. You're sure? Celeste asked. Melanie nodded. I want her off everything. Celeste didn't argue. She simply uncapped her pen and slid over the first document. Power of attorney, medical and financial, will revoke Lisa's designation today. Melanie read the paragraph twice, then signed her name slowly, looping each letter like she was taking her time to walk away. Celeste tapped her tablet. Next up, will amendment. Melanie's eyes flicked down the line. Primary beneficiary, Lisa Ann Rivers. She crossed it out in thick blue ink. I want the house redirected. To whom? Celeste asked, pausing. Melanie smiled. Not a whom, a what? Celeste raised an eyebrow. A housing nonprofit, Melanie said. One that places older women in safe units. I want this place to shelter someone who won't be forgotten when she's sick. Celeste nodded slowly, impressed. You've really thought this through. I've had time, Melanie replied. Silence gives you space. They paused when the assistant brought in tea. Celeste poured 2 cups. Melanie took hers and leaned back slightly in her chair. I used to run myself ragged for them, you know, babysitting last minute, grocery money tucked into birthday cards, Thanksgiving meals they took home in Tupperware. "You thought they'd remember?" Celeste said gently. "No," Melanie corrected. "I thought they'd care without needing to." There was a knock on the glass. Gloria stepped in, wind-chapped cheeks flushed from the walk over. She wore a puffer vest over a sweatshirt that read, "Library girls never retire, they just renew." Melanie's face warmed. "There she is," Gloria smiled, pulling off her gloves. "What did I miss?" "Nothing," Celeste said, rising. "Except your promotion." Gloria blinked. "My what?" "You're now Melanie's power of attorney, medical and financial. Co-executor of her estate too, if she'll have you." Gloria's hand hovered mid-air. "You serious?" Melanie nodded. "You've already saved my life. You might as well hold the pen for it." Gloria teared up and waved it away with a laugh. "Well, hell, at least I get to be nosy legally now." They signed the papers together. 3 women, no blood shared, all loyalty earned. The first chemo appointment was 3 days later. Gloria offered to come, but Melanie said no. "I need to feel what it is to do this for me," she said, "not for anyone else's comfort." She wore a navy scarf, soft around her scalp, brought her own blanket, downloaded an audiobook she wouldn't finish. When it was done, she walked out with slower steps, but a straighter spine. On the way home, she stopped at a florist and picked out a bouquet of sunflowers. "For me," she told the girl at the counter, "I'm the one who showed up." That night, she placed them on the mantel, yellow and stubborn. Later, her phone buzzed. A voice memo. "Lisa." Melanie hesitated, pressed play. "Hey, we saw the insurance claim notice, and, wow, we didn't realize it was that serious. We just assumed you'd bounce back like you always do." Click. Melanie didn't listen twice. She opened her journal. Under the last entry, she wrote, "They assumed I'd survive. I assumed they'd show up. Only one of us was right." The next morning, her mailbox holds a card, no return address, marked "Get Well." Inside, a flyer for a family cruise. Lisa's handwriting says, "Maybe we can all reset. They assumed I'd survive. I assumed they'd show up." Melanie sat at the kitchen table the morning after the card arrived, the unopened cruise flyer still lying where she had dropped it, half obscured beneath the mail from her insurance provider. The envelope's gold embossing caught the sun in a garish gleam, as if celebration could be gift-wrapped and shipped to someone you had emotionally vacated. Her fingers moved slowly across the page, rereading Lisa's handwriting for the 3rd time. "Maybe we can all reset?" Reset. As if this were a software glitch. As if the last several weeks, her diagnosis, her chemo, her unreturned messages, could be resolved with a buffet and beach chairs. Across the table, her phone sat face down. The voice memo still echoed in her mind, even though she hadn't listened to it again since that first play, but the phrasing had etched itself too cleanly to be forgotten. "We didn't realize it was that serious. We just assumed you'd bounce back like you always do." Assumed. The word had stuck with her like a sliver beneath the skin. Not asked, not cared, not offered, just assumed. After a long breath, Melanie opened her laptop and created a new secure folder within her estate planning files. She titled it, "Documentation, Emotional Neglect." It wasn't spite, it was record-keeping. She took a screenshot of the voice memo metadata and dropped it into the folder. Then she clicked open her word processor and began a running log, part therapeutic, part legal, entirely factual. Recovery log. Supplement to estate file. Chapter 1. Who didn't come? September 14th. No call or text after biopsy appointment. October 3rd. Sent home post-procedure via Lyft. No one met me at the door. October 5th. Text from Lisa. Hope it's nothing serious. October 6th to 7th. 36 hours of silence after confirming cancer diagnosis. October 11th. First chemo infusion. No offers of support, no presence. October 14th. Cruise flyer in mail. No direct question about my health. She added timestamps, contact methods, and emotional impact notes where relevant. The exercise felt oddly stabilizing, like tiling a floor beneath feet that had been wobbling since the first voicemail. Later that afternoon, Melanie called Celeste to ask whether a supplemental log could carry legal weight in a disputed estate. Celeste's voice was clear, firm, unsurprised. Courts are starting to pay attention to emotional abandonment, especially when healthcare proxies and financial responsibilities are involved. Keep documenting everything. Don't dramatize. Just be thorough. Melanie nodded quietly. I've stopped hoping they'll show up, but I'm not going to let them rewrite this. I'm proud of you, Celeste said. And it matters. I promise you, it matters. After the call ended, Melanie retrieved a worn manila envelope from her filing cabinet, the one marked Accounts, Shared Access, and laid the papers out on the dining table. Over the past decade, she'd added Lisa's name to everything: savings, checking, emergency funds. Back then, it had felt like preparation. Now it felt like carelessness, disguised as trust. She logged into her bank's online portal and began revoking access one field at a time. The savings account, previously named Family Contingency Fund, was the last one she reached. She paused when prompted to rename it. After a beat, she typed slowly, Emergency Exit Fund. When asked for a reason, she wrote, Reassigned for clarity and self-preservation. She clicked Save and closed the browser window. That evening, she lit a candle in the kitchen, lavender and cedar, and sat down to her journal, the one Lisa had gifted her 6 years ago, with a card that said, For all your beautiful thoughts. Melanie flipped to a clean page and began writing. They assumed I'd survive. I assumed they'd show up. Only one of us was right. Silence is not neutral. It is a decision. She closed the journal softly and set it beside her laptop. Before bed, she glanced at her phone. Social media notifications had piled up, and though she normally avoided scrolling through that curated world, something drew her in tonight. She opened the app and went directly to Lisa's profile. The most recent post was a carousel of family photos: the kids at a pumpkin patch, Mark smiling under fairy lights, Lisa posing with her in-laws over cider. In the caption, she'd written, So grateful for this circle. We've been through a lot this year, but the people who matter show up. Family first. Melanie stared at it for a long moment. She was not tagged, not mentioned, not present. She didn't feel excluded. She felt clarified. The next morning, Gloria texts her a screenshot of the post, with a comment from an old friend of Melanie's that reads, Lisa, where's your mom? They took me off their schedule. I took them off my legacy. Melanie sat in the warm hush of Celeste's office again, this time not as a woman seeking options, but as one confirming boundaries. Outside, autumn leaves drifted past the window in slow spirals, the kind of movement that made time feel optional. But in here, everything was deliberate. Celeste tapped her pen against the polished surface of the oak desk and looked up from the screen. This version locks everything, she said. No ambiguity. If Lisa doesn't meet the criteria, she doesn't inherit. Not a cent. Melanie nodded once, calm. Spell it out. Celeste turned the screen so she could see. Beneficiary clause, conditional distribution recipient, Lisa Ann Rivers. Conditions of inheritance, written acknowledgement of harm caused during Melanie Rivers's cancer diagnosis and treatment. Proof of consistent emotional and logistical care over a 12-month period. A notarized letter of apology submitted to the family archive with the subject line, I wasn't there when she needed me. Melanie read it 3 times. She didn't flinch. Good, she said. It's not revenge, it's documentation. And if she doesn't fulfill it? Celeste asked. She won't. The cursor blinked once, then Celeste saved the file. They moved on to the deed. Melanie reached into her bag and pulled out a printed brochure she'd bookmarked for months, Harbor Home Network, Dignified Housing for Aging Women. The cover showed a modest craftsman-style home with flower beds and a wraparound porch. I want the house to go to them, she said, free and clear. Celeste's eyebrows lifted slightly, but she didn't object. You don't want it to pass through Ava? Melanie shook her head. She'll have what I left her elsewhere. This house should matter to someone who needs it, not just someone who misses it after it's gone. Understood, Celeste said. I'll file the deed transfer as part of the trust. It'll be protected from challenge. And Gloria? Melanie asked. She'll be listed as co-executor and healthcare proxy, jointly responsible with our firm, fully authorized. Melanie leaned back, her breath slow but rooted. She wasn't reclaiming power. She was redistributing it to the people who had earned it, even if their names had never been scribbled into her family tree. As Celeste printed the documents, Melanie looked at the file name on the screen, Post-Biopsy Estate, Final Draft.pdf. She smiled. The signatures were inked one after another, Melanie's steady, Celeste's practiced, the witnesses swift. When it was done, Melanie gathered the pages into a folder with crisp, unbending edges. The weight felt different than it had weeks ago, less like loss, more like architecture. Back home, she made herself chamomile tea and opened her laptop. The estate files, once scattered across folders and flash drives, were now sorted into a secure archive. Gloria had a backup, Celeste had 3. Nothing would be undone without force. And even then, not for long. She reached for her planner and flipped to a blank page. With her pen poised just above the line, she debated what to call it. Then she wrote, Life Without Performers. No one else would see that title, but she would. And she'd remember why it mattered. As she rose to clean up the tea mug, her phone buzzed on the counter. She picked it up, half expecting another automated appointment reminder. Instead, Lisa. She stared at the screen for a moment before pressing play on the voicemail. Hey, Mom, Mark and I were talking and, we were thinking maybe we could take you out to dinner next week, just to catch up and see how you're doing? No mention of the estate, no reference to the cancer, just a vague performance of concern. After weeks of silence, missteps, and minimization, this was the olive branch? Melanie let the message play out. Then she tapped save, not delete. Documentation was still ongoing. That night, Gloria drops by with a sealed manila envelope, inside a photo of Lisa rifling through Melanie's porch mailbox, time-stamped. She forgot I have a camera, Gloria says. Suddenly I mattered. Turns out I posted a photo in a headscarf. The invitation had arrived via voicemail, but the reason became clear 2 days later, on a Wednesday afternoon, when Melanie received a flood of notifications on her old Facebook account. Someone had tagged her. Unusual. She rarely posted anymore, but when she opened the app, the truth sat waiting. There it was, a photo of her from last week, snapped by Gloria outside the infusion center. Melanie, seated on a bench, wrapped in her soft navy headscarf, cheeks pale but smiling faintly, holding a bouquet of sunflowers. Gloria had posted it with a simple caption, Strength isn't always loud. She walked out of that clinic like it owed her an apology. It had gotten dozens of shares. Some comments from old neighbors, others from strangers, one from Ava. Lisa hadn't liked it, but she had seen it. Melanie agreed to the dinner that night. They met at a mid-range bistro, trendy but dim enough to soften the discomfort between people who used to pretend to know each other better than they did. Lisa arrived first, hair perfectly set, a bouquet of white tulips in hand. For you, she said, as if the flowers could offset what hadn't been said for weeks. Melanie took them with a nod, no smile. Mark followed behind, offering an awkward half-hug that Melanie didn't step into. He sat down across from her and immediately launched into a commentary about how work had been relentless and how the kids were impossible to wrangle this month. The waiter arrived. Water was poured. Menus glanced at, mostly ignored. Melanie noted the glances Lisa gave to nearby tables, checking reflections, straightening her necklace. Not once did she ask how the chemo was going. Not once did Mark even reference her diagnosis. Instead, Lisa asked about the weather, Ava's school play, how strange the new parking meters downtown were. Melanie watched them both. She chewed slowly, drank tea, let them fill the table with everything but presence. Somewhere near dessert, Lisa leaned forward, hand brushing the edge of her fork. You know, I've been thinking, it would be nice to do this more, just you and us. Melanie folded her napkin carefully on her lap. Why now? Lisa blinked. What do you mean? Melanie tilted her head, voice soft. I've been sick for months. You didn't come to the hospital. You didn't call after the diagnosis, but now there's a photo online and suddenly I get tulips? Lisa's face flushed. That's not fair. Melanie looked at her, still calm. You're right. It's not fair. But it is accurate. Mark shifted uncomfortably. Lisa's voice sharpened. Don't be dramatic. Melanie placed her napkin on the table, stood and reached for her purse. This was closure, she said, not connection. She walked to the register before the check was brought, paid the bill in full, tipped generously. Lisa and Mark remained seated. She didn't look back. Back home, Melanie set the tulips in the sink, unwrapped but waterless. She wouldn't throw them out just yet. That would be a decision for tomorrow. She pulled out the file of estate paperwork once more. The revisions were all there. The protections filed, signed, and validated. But there was one document still unsigned, the final certification for the will's notary clause. It required in-person witnessing, just one final layer of permanence. Gloria came over within the hour, carrying a lemon tart and the kind of silence that respects the aftermath. You ready? She asked. Melanie nodded. They signed together at the kitchen table. Melanie's pen moved slowly but without tremor. When it was done, she leaned back and exhaled. It's finished, she said. Really finished. Later that night, after Gloria had gone, Melanie stepped onto her porch to retrieve the mail. She noticed the bin was open. At first, she thought she'd forgotten to close it earlier, but something was off. The top few letters were shuffled. The next morning, Gloria texted, "Check your camera, 6:41 p.m. She didn't even look around first. Attached, a screenshot. There was Lisa, hand deep in the mail bin, eyes scanning fast. Melanie stared at the image. No anger, just confirmation. She saved it to the estate file folder, unauthorized access, family member/mail tampering. Melanie opens the mailbox the next evening. Inside is a hand-addressed envelope, unsigned, with the words, "You don't get to rewrite history." She forgot I had security cameras. I didn't forget the law. The envelope sat in Melanie's lap as she reviewed the camera footage, each frame a flicker of betrayal she had already expected, but needed to see. Gloria's screenshot had been enough to confirm it, but Melanie believed in full documentation. She always had. She paused the footage at 6:41 p.m., the moment Lisa appeared in the frame. Jacketed, hurried, no attempt at stealth. Her hands dove into the mail bin with the reflex of entitlement, not hesitation. 2 envelopes shuffled, a third one skimmed, then she turned, blinked toward the street, and left. Melanie stared at the still image. The resolution was sharp enough to see her daughter's jaw set with focus, not guilt. She downloaded the video, saved it to a new folder labeled Evidence, Mail Tampering, Lisa Rivers. Then she moved it to an encrypted drive and tucked a physical copy onto a labeled flash drive. The title she printed on the USB label? Watch this, if she objects in court. At 9:12 a.m., she met Gloria on the porch. I want to confront her, Gloria said, voice clipped. Melanie shook her head. Not today. Not like that. But Gloria's energy was kinetic, and Melanie could see it had been brewing. She handed her the flash drive anyway. If she shows up again, and I'm not home, you're authorized. Later that week, Lisa did show up again. This time, Gloria was ready. She intercepted her on the walkway, arms folded, phone in hand. You're not welcome on this property, Gloria said. Lisa tried to laugh it off. I was just checking in, making sure Mom's mail wasn't piling up. Gloria held up the phone, screen recording. Try that line again, with the sheriff present next time. Lisa's eyes narrowed. This is harassment. No, Gloria said. This is protection. You gave up proximity when you gave up effort. Lisa stormed off, keys jangling, muttering something about overreaction. Melanie watched it all from the upstairs window, hands folded calmly over her cardigan. The quiet downstairs didn't feel tense anymore. It felt reinforced. The next morning, she drove to the local precinct, not in panic, but in procedure. She walked up to the desk and requested to file a non-emergency report. Mail tampering. Name, Lisa Rivers. Relationship, daughter. Status, estranged. She requested it be filed for documentation purposes only, no contact request yet, just a timestamp in the city's database. "Are there any threats of violence?" the officer asked, pen hovering. "Only to my paperwork," she replied dryly. When she returned home, she replaced the lock on the mailbox and posted a small engraved sign beside the porch. "Private property. No trespassing. No exceptions." She sent a digital copy of the police report to Celeste, along with the footage. Celeste's reply came 10 minutes later, logged under boundary violations, immediate family. File code RIV/TRESP-01. Melanie printed it, 3-hole punched it, and filed it in her binder, beneath her trust amendments, beside her healthcare directive. Later that night, she sat on the sofa with a hot water bottle tucked behind her lower back. A movie played in the background, some classic she wasn't really watching. Her journal was open across her lap. The last line she'd written remained unfinished. "I no longer wait to be included. I record who tried to re-enter." The doorbell didn't ring again that week, but the inbox did. A new email. Subject: Request to review financial accounts. Sender: Mark Rivers. Message: "Hi Melanie, we were hoping to get clarity on some family accounts, especially ones Dad may have mentioned setting up. Could we schedule a time to go over some details? Hope you're doing well." She stared at the screen, her finger hovering over the delete button. Instead, she forwarded it to Celeste with a short note. "They're phishing now. Flag it." Then she sat back, eyes heavy, resolve unshaken. The next morning, a letter arrives from Lisa's new attorney, marked confidential with one opening line. "Our client believes her mother is no longer of sound mind to manage her estate independently. He wanted to review assets. I reviewed the years they weren't there." The conference room was intentionally sterile. Cream walls, quiet HVAC, a ticking wall clock that could have passed for indifferent if it weren't so punctual. Melanie sat on one side of the table, her posture upright, not defensive. Across from her, Lisa flipped through her phone while Mark scanned the shelf of legal books, pretending curiosity. Celeste walked in, holding the revised trust file like it was a closing argument. "Thank you both for coming," she said, setting the folder down with precise care. "We're here at Melanie's request to walk you through the structure of her estate now that recent changes have been formally enacted." Lisa raised an eyebrow. "Recent?" Mark glanced up. "We assumed everything was still the same." Melanie didn't smile. "Assumption's been a running theme." Celeste opened the binder and turned it toward them. She slid over copies, each page paper-clipped, flagged, date-stamped. "Let's begin with the trust," Celeste said. "As of last month, Melanie's assets, including her home, retirement, and health directives, are no longer shared, inherited, or accessed by either of you." Lisa blinked, then leaned forward. "Wait, what?" Mark cleared his throat. "I think maybe there's some misunderstanding. We just wanted to see what was still active from Dad's planning, that's all." "There's no misunderstanding," Melanie said, voice calm. "You're here for clarity. Here it is." Celeste turned to the page labeled Conditional. Beneficiary clauses. Lisa's name appeared in bold, followed by a list of stipulations. Lisa's eyes narrowed as she read, "Written acknowledgement of harm during Melanie's illness, proof of consistent care over 12 months, a notarized apology to be placed in the family record." "You've got to be kidding," Lisa said, pushing the paper back. "You expect a signed confession?" "No," Melanie said, folding her hands. "I expect accountability." Lisa turned to her, voice rising. "We thought you didn't want help. Every time we offered—" Melanie cut in, quiet but clear. "You never offered. You avoided. You assumed I'd handle it. You texted while I was under anesthesia. You sent a lift after my biopsy. You sent soup. Not presents." Mark opened his mouth, then shut it. Melanie continued, still composed. "And now that my name shows up in a caption, you want to dine with me. Review my accounts. Ask about my will. That's not family. That's follow-up." Lisa's cheeks flushed. "This is cruel." Celeste closed the binder. "What's cruel is being erased and then expected to perform gratitude when the spotlight returns." The room was silent. Even the HVAC seemed to pause. Melanie pushed back her chair. You opted out of my care. I opted you out of my estate. Lisa didn't speak. Mark watched the papers as if hoping they'd realign themselves under a different name. Celeste slid the copies into an envelope. You're welcome to have this for reference, but nothing in it is negotiable. The meeting ended without a handshake. Outside in the parking lot, Melanie exhaled. The chill in the air didn't touch her. That, Celeste said, unlocking the passenger door, was a surgical cut. Melanie nodded. Precision over performance. They didn't go for coffee afterward. There was nothing left to sip on. That evening, Melanie returned home and placed her signed file into the fireproof cabinet. She poured herself tea and lit a small candle, lavender and bergamot. Then she watched a detective show and folded laundry like the day hadn't closed a chapter. But the calm was brief. The next morning, a thick envelope arrived, couriered, signature required. She signed without asking, slit the seal. Inside, a cease and desist letter from Lisa's attorney. Claim, defamation of character, alleged mental incapacity, motion for estate conservatorship pending. Melanie read it in full. Then she picked up her phone and called Celeste. Add this to the file, she said. Already printing, Celeste replied. We'll respond with clarity and receipts. Melanie hung up and stood at her window. Outside, a gust lifted the garden wind chime. No melody, just movement. That night, Melanie receives a handwritten note from Ava, sealed in pink. Can I come see you alone? I have questions no one will answer. They called it elder coercion. I called it notarized. The courthouse letterhead was heavy stock, the kind that tried to command silence just by being opened. Melanie turned the cease and desist over in her hands twice before setting it on the counter, unread for a full 10 minutes. She didn't need to see the language to know the tone, suspicion draped in legalese, fear masquerading as concern. By mid-morning, she'd read it line by line. The claim was clear. Lisa, through her new attorney, alleged Melanie was no longer of sound mental capacity at the time of her most recent estate amendments. It cited erratic decisions, unreasonable asset reallocation, and the undue influence of non-family individuals. Undue influence. Melanie nearly laughed. Instead, she called Celeste. She's going for guardianship? Melanie asked, tone flat. She's bluffing, Celeste replied, already pulling up the documents. But we're not blinking. By the end of the day, Celeste had filed formal rebuttals, each more precise than the last. First, a certified mental capacity letter from Melanie's therapist, dated and signed. Second, a letter from Dr. Weiss, her oncologist, stating that Melanie was lucid and independently functioning throughout her course of care. Third, a notarized statement from Gloria affirming Melanie's clarity, consent, and initiative during all trust and power of attorney changes. But Melanie wasn't content with silence, not anymore. That night, she sat at her desk with a glass of cool water and opened a blank document. At the top, she typed, "To anyone whose illness was met with distance." She wrote from memory, no notes needed. I was diagnosed with cancer alone. I came home from surgery in a lift. I received flowers weeks after my first infusion, but only after someone posted a photo of me in a headscarf. When I asked for nothing, I got silence. When I gave something, I became property again. She wrote until the words settled like bricks. Then she hit post to a closed community support group for women undergoing treatment without family support. The response was immediate. Dozens of comments, then hundreds. Stories poured in. Abandoned mothers, silent sons, absentee, partners. Melanie's inbox filled with messages. "Thank you for saying what we're told not to." "My daughter did the same, and I thought I was alone." "You're not invisible, you're vital." Celeste called the next day with a clipped sense of satisfaction. Lisa's attorney just withdrew their challenge. No petition for guardianship, no hearing. Melanie leaned back in her chair, watching the filtered light fall across her bookshelf. "She's scared of discovery," Celeste added, "and now she knows we have paper armor." Melanie didn't feel vindicated. She felt insulated, which, for the first time in months, was enough. She walked out to the garden with pruning shears and trimmed back the dead leaves on her hydrangeas. Their skeleton blooms clung to their stems stubbornly, but she snipped with steady hands. That afternoon, she compiled all her documentation into a single flash drive. She labeled it Capacity, noted and added it to the secure drawer with her medical records. In the evening, Gloria brought over chili and fresh bread. No talk of law, just warmth, second helpings, and a good-natured grumble about the rising price of flour. After Gloria left, Melanie sat down to log her day. She opened her journal and added one simple line: "False claims don't survive real records." Just as she was setting her pen down, her phone buzzed. A new message from Avenue. "Can I visit you alone? I have questions no one will answer." The screen glowed in the dark, soft and unflinching. Melanie didn't respond yet. She just placed the phone face up beside her tea. Outside, the wind moved through the porch chimes again, this time not noise but music. That weekend, Ava steps off the city bus with a worn notebook and a bag of groceries. She hugs Melanie tightly and says, "You're the only person who ever stayed in the room." She showed up with cookies, and without her mother. Saturday morning broke soft and gray. A low, filtered light slanted through the blinds, the kind that made the world feel quieter. Melanie stood at the kitchen counter, slicing an apple she wasn't hungry for, when she heard the crunch of the city bus brakes at the corner. She didn't rush to the window. She didn't need to. By the time she opened the door, Ava was already halfway up the walkway, hair in a messy braid, Converse sneakers scuffed at the toes, a canvas bag tugging at her shoulder. In one hand, she carried a plastic grocery sack. In the other, a white bakery box sealed with red string. "Hi, Grandma," Ava said, slightly breathless but sure. Melanie opened the door wider. "You came alone?" "I asked Mom to drop me at the bus stop, told her I needed air." Melanie stepped aside. "Come in. I made tea." Ava toed off her shoes in the hallway, then held up the bag. "I brought you ginger cookies. From the place you like. And apples, the kind with the stripe." Melanie felt something loosen behind her ribs. They sat in the kitchen, knees almost touching. Ava pulled out a small blue notebook, corners dog-eared, the front cover scratched from overuse. "I've been writing stuff down," she said. "Things I remember. From before." Melanie raised an eyebrow. "Before what?" Ava paused, then looked up. "Before Mom started saying you were difficult or confused." Melanie didn't reply right away. The words sat between them like something both of them were still learning how to name. "I don't know why she talks like that," Ava said, quieter. "But I remember you made grilled cheese with 3 slices of cheese when I had the flu. I remember how you always kept fuzzy socks in the drawer for sleepovers. And I remember the backyard sprinkler. You didn't even get mad when we flooded the porch." Melanie blinked quickly, but one tear made it through. She wiped it with the back of her hand, laughing softly. "I kept the socks," she said. "I just don't have small feet in the house anymore." Ava smiled, then pulled a folded piece of paper from her notebook and slid it across the table. "I know it's not a legal document, but this says I remember. I wanted to give it to you before anyone told me not to." Melanie unfolded it. Inside was a simple line in Ava's neat print. "You stayed. That's enough for me." Melanie folded the paper with slow care, then stood. She walked to the study and returned with a slim green folder. Inside it were 20 envelopes, each sealed, each labeled with a date. She handed it to Ava. "What's this?" Ava asked, running her fingers across the edges. "Letters," Melanie said. "One for every birthday from 15 to 25. Stories, notes, reminders of who you were and who you can be. If you ever feel erased, these will remind you I saw all of it." Ava hugged her then, tight, arms firm around Melanie's middle, chin pressed into her shoulder, like she remembered exactly how this hug had felt when she was smaller. "You're in my life no matter what Mom says," she whispered. Melanie closed her eyes. Let it land. That afternoon, while Ava napped on the couch, Melanie quietly logged onto her trust portal. She clicked into the Beneficiaries tab and selected Ava's name. Then she typed in the update: Ava Rivers, sole minor beneficiary. Education grant initiated, unrestricted. She clicked Confirm. The screen blinked. Update saved. Later, they ate soup. Ava told her about school. Melanie listened, smiling with half her strength, but when she stood to clear the dishes, a sudden cough gripped her ribs. She braced herself against the sink. Another cough, then another, deep, catching, hollow. Ava sat upright. "Grandma?" Melanie held up a hand. Just a tickle. But her breath was slow to return. She sat down, quietly shaken. Ava hovered nearby, nervous but trying not to overreact. By evening, the cough had come back. A little deeper. A little sharper. Gloria arrived after a quick call. "We're going to the ER," she said without debate, helping Melanie into her coat while Ava grabbed the bag of insurance cards and meds. Melanie didn't argue. She just turned to Ava and said, "Don't worry. I've done harder things alone." Ava whispered, "But you're not alone now." Melanie smiled. "Exactly." At the ER, a nurse pulls Gloria aside. "We're admitting her. The scans show a secondary infection, maybe worse. Even when the body fails, the will doesn't." The ER lights were too bright. Melanie squinted against the glare as they wheeled her through sliding glass doors and into a curtained bay, the plastic bracelet already snug around her wrist. She heard the words being exchanged over her head. Oxygen levels low, productive cough, chemo compromised. Like a script she wasn't meant to answer. She didn't panic. She was past panic. But there was a slow, weighted awareness settling in her chest. This could shift everything. Gloria stayed close. She didn't ask for permission to sit in the room or to text Ava back. She just did quietly, with her coat draped over the back of the plastic chair and a legal pad already peeking from her tote. Melanie glanced at it, smirked through her oxygen mask. "You brought estate files to the ER?" she asked, voice hoarse. "Habit," Gloria replied. "And I know you." That night, after the scans confirmed pneumonia, the nurse gently pulled Gloria aside. "We're admitting her," she said, keeping her voice low. "There's some fluid, possibly early infection. Could be worse if untreated." Gloria nodded, jaw set. "Do what you need. I'll stay." Melanie spent that first night in a quiet haze of IV drips and oxygen tubes. She drifted in and out of shallow dreams, memories of the old library stacks, of Ava reading under a blanket fort, of Lisa's small hand wrapped around hers in a parking lot 30 years ago. But none of those moments followed her into the morning. At sunrise, the nurse, young, cheerful, too energetic for the hour, gently tapped her arm. "Vitals are holding steady, fever's down a bit." Melanie opened one eye. "Then bring me a pen." The nurse blinked. "A pen? I've got directives to update." Within the hour, Gloria retrieved her tablet from the lobby and sat beside Melanie's bed. Together, they reviewed the final healthcare instructions. Melanie insisted every clause be read aloud before she signed. At one line, she stopped. "Add a no contact exception," she said. Gloria looked up. "For whom?" "Lisa and Mark," Melanie said, her voice firmer now. "If I'm unconscious, they're not to be admitted or consulted, emergency or not." Gloria hesitated only long enough to confirm. "Done." Melanie signed it, slowly, clearly, a clean line on the page. The nurse who witnessed it nodded, and her name joined theirs in neat print. "Thank God for chosen family," Melanie said as the clipboard was passed back. 2 days later, Ava sent a video. Melanie watched it on her hospital tablet. Ava at a school piano, fingers tentative but sincere, playing a halting version of Claire de Lune. The video ended with Ava looking directly into the camera. "Get better, Grandma," she said. "I need you." Melanie didn't cry, but her grip on the tablet tightened. By day 3, her oxygen levels had stabilized. The fever broke overnight. When the nurse removed the IV, Melanie looked down at the mark it left behind, small, red, fading, just like everything else. "You'll be discharged in a few hours," the nurse said. "Doctor's orders." Gloria helped her into a soft fleece sweater and brushed her hair gently behind her ears. "I told you we'd get through this," she said. Melanie nodded. "We're not done yet." That afternoon, back home, she climbed the stairs slowly but without pause. Ava had left a folded blanket on the couch and a note on the coffee table. There's soup in the fridge. I didn't burn it this time. Melanie smiled, tucked it in her journal, and sat with her tea steeping beside her. The email arrived an hour later. Subject line, manuscript sample, accepted. Her hands trembled slightly as she clicked it open. Dear Ms. Rivers, thank you for your recent submission. We would be honored to publish your essay, When Cancer Didn't Hurt as Much as Family, in our upcoming series. Your story is one many readers need. Melanie stared at the screen. No tears, just the kind of stillness that felt earned. Gloria knocks gently on the door, holding an envelope. You got a check, she says, from the publisher, and a contract. You're officially in print. They never asked about my story. Now it's on shelves. The envelope was thick, heavier than it looked. Gloria handed it over with a grin that hovered between proud and reverent. Official, she said, tapping it once with her knuckle. Checks inside. And a signed contract. They called it a personal reckoning with generational absence. I call it a damn fine piece of truth. Melanie sat down slowly on the edge of the couch, peeled the envelope open, and pulled out the first page. There it was. Her name, her title, When Cancer Didn't Hurt as Much as Family, by Melanie Rivers. Her fingers lingered over the words like they might vanish if she blinked. Below, a publishing house logo, a release date, royalties schedule. It was real. They asked if you'd record a short reading for the podcast, Gloria added, just a few paragraphs. Melanie nodded slowly. I'll do it tomorrow. I want to sound steady. By the end of the week, the piece had gone live. The essay wasn't flashy. It wasn't angry. It was precise, measured. A slow unfolding of abandonment and autonomy, of the gap between shared DNA and chosen presence. It opened with a quiet account of the Lyft ride home from her biopsy and ended with the sentence, I didn't lose family. I stopped pretending they were holding me. Messages began to arrive within hours, dozens at first, then hundreds. Some were brief, thank you, or this felt like my life. Others spilled over with stories of their own. A nurse from Texas wrote, I left my mother after her third relapse. It broke me. I didn't go back. Your piece helped me name the guilt and give it back to the people who earned it. Thank you for showing what survival looks like. An older man from Vermont wrote, I thought I was weak for feeling forgotten. I realize now I was just too polite to name the absence. You gave me language. I'll never forget that. Melanie read every word. She didn't respond to most. She didn't need to. The essay had already spoken. By the second week, she was asked to appear on a podcast episode titled Rewriting the Family Tree, When Care Becomes a One-Way Street. She accepted. The host asked gentle, grounded questions. Melanie answered with poise, stories sharpened not by bitterness, but by time. Gloria threw her a launch party the next Saturday. It wasn't elaborate, just finger foods, lemon bars, and a table scattered with printed copies of the publication. Neighbors stopped by, a few women from her old book club. Even her former oncologist sent flowers. At the center of it all sat Melanie in a soft blue sweater, sipping tea, her voice hoarse but light. You look, Gloria whispered, like someone who finally got the floor. Because I did, Melanie said. Toward the end of the evening, Ava arrived with paint on her sleeves and a narrow canvas wrapped in brown paper. It's not perfect, she warned, but it's for your wall, the one behind the desk. Melanie unwrapped it slowly. The painting was simple, a small house under a blue sky, and beneath it, in Ava's neat block letters, the phrase, held together by who stayed. Melanie didn't speak. She just pulled Ava in and kissed her hair. Later that night, when the guests were gone and the kitchen had returned to stillness, Melanie hung the painting exactly where Ava had imagined. She stepped back, took it in, and smiled. She was preparing for bed when the doorbell rang. It was nearly 9. She moved to the peephole slowly, not rushing, just aware. Lisa stood on the porch, not with flowers, not with apologies, just her, empty-handed, unsure. Melanie didn't open the door. Not yet. She turned off the hallway light, letting the dark settle between them. On the other side, Lisa didn't knock again. The next morning, a sealed envelope appears in Melanie's mailbox. No return address. Inside, a childhood photo of Lisa and Melanie, torn down the middle and taped back together. She stood on my porch like nothing happened. I answered like everything had. The photo had been torn once, then taped back together with neat lines, the kind of care that tried to mimic repair but couldn't erase the crease. Melanie set it gently on the counter next to the kettle and stared at the soft focus of younger faces, her own arm around Lisa, both of them laughing at something now long out of frame. Outside, the wind nudged the wind chime into a low, uncertain tremble. By noon, Lisa came back. No knock, just presence. She stood on the porch like a child waiting to be allowed inside after curfew. The same blank stillness in her shoulders. The same tilt of chin, defensive even when asking. Melanie opened the door halfway. No words yet. Lisa looked up. "Hi." Melanie nodded. "Morning." Lisa hesitated. "I saw your piece. The podcast, too. I didn't know you were going through all that." Melanie didn't soften. "I wrote it all down." Lisa's throat moved like she wanted to swallow something difficult. "We didn't know how to help," she said finally. "Mark and we thought you needed space." Melanie let out a breath that was not a laugh. "You knew. You chose not to. That's different." Lisa blinked. "Can we talk? Really talk?" Melanie stepped back just enough to let her inside. Not warmly, just enough for containment. They sat at the kitchen table. No tea this time. No middle cushion of comfort. "I messed up," Lisa said after a long pause. "I let the day-to-day swallow the bigger things." Melanie nodded once. "You let convenience overwrite care." Lisa looked down at her hands. Her voice dropped. "Is there a way to come back from that?" Melanie studied her for a moment, then rose slowly, walked to the drawer near the bookshelf, and pulled out a sealed envelope. It was cream-colored, the flap glued clean, her handwriting neat across the front. To Lisa, read when ready to hear. She placed it on the table between them. Lisa reached for it, but Melanie didn't let go just yet. "This doesn't open the door," she said. "It closes it. On my terms." Lisa stilled. "What is it?" "A list," Melanie said. "Every date you didn't show up, every moment I was alone with a hospital bracelet or legal document, I itemized them. For clarity." Lisa's eyes welled, but she didn't argue. "I need to be in the will," she whispered. "Not for the money, just to feel like I'm still family." Melanie finally let go of the envelope. "Family isn't felt, it's shown." Lisa stood slowly, the envelope pressed to her chest. "I don't know what to say," she murmured. "Then say nothing," Melanie replied. "But don't come back unless you learn how to say more." Lisa didn't slam the door. She didn't cry. She just walked to the car, started the engine, and pulled away with mechanical precision. Melanie stood at the window, watching the vehicle shrink toward the curve in the road. She felt no regret, only air. Later that afternoon, Ava arrived unexpectedly, jeans cuffed, hoodie speckled with charcoal smudges. "Special delivery," she said, holding up a long white envelope. "Guidance office gave it to me, said it was urgent." Melanie took it, heart fluttering. They sat on the couch together, side by side as she opened it. The letterhead read, "Congratulations. The Women's Equity Scholars Foundation. Recipient, Ava Rivers. Award, full tuition grant. Art and Social Advocacy track." Melanie read it twice, then once more, slower. Ava leaned her head against her shoulder. "I didn't even apply for it," she said. "Someone nominated me." Melanie closed her eyes. She didn't need to ask who. That evening, Melanie updates her will with one sentence. "For the one who stayed." Then folds it beside a note labeled, "To be opened after my last breath." She won the trust, because she never asked for it. Melanie watched Ava's fingers trace the edges of the scholarship letter, like it might dissolve if she blinked too hard. The sun filtered in through the living room curtains, catching on the edges of the paper, gilding it with something close to awe. They didn't speak for a long moment. Just sat there on the couch, the air between them filled with the kind of stillness that only comes after something life-altering lands quietly. "You knew, didn't you?" Ava asked softly. Melanie nodded. Gloria and I filed the foundation paperwork 2 months ago. I didn't know which school it would go to, but I knew who it was for. Ava stared at the letter. You named a fund after me? I named it after what you did, Melanie replied. You stayed, you listened, you never once asked for something you didn't earn. Ava's voice caught. But I didn't do anything special. Melanie smiled. Exactly. They celebrated with root beer floats that afternoon. Melanie didn't have the energy for more than a soft blanket and ice cream melting faster than the soda could catch up, but it was enough. Ava made popcorn anyway and put on an old movie neither of them really watched. Before Ava left, Melanie handed her a copy of the official paperwork, stamped, notarized, filed. Ava tucked it into her backpack next to her sketch pad, and when she hugged Melanie goodbye, it was the kind that didn't carry the fear of it being the last. Later that evening, Melanie sat at her desk and opened the estate file one last time. She scrolled to the final page of the digital version and typed in a single line, "For the one who stayed." She signed it, uploaded it, and sent a copy to Celeste with the subject line, "Final, final." After, she reached for her journal. The leather was soft at the edges now, worn from weeks of documenting grief, clarity, and the long arc of disappointment. She turned to the last page and wrote, "Justice isn't rage, it's realignment." She didn't close the book right away. She let it sit open, the ink still drying under the soft pool of lamplight. Across the room, the fireplace flickered low, and the whole house seemed to breathe with her. Stable, that was the word. Not healed, not resolved, but stable. Her health had plateaued, her legal defenses were unshakable. The people who mattered were in the right files with the right keys. The ones who didn't were simply absent, and that no longer felt like a threat. She stood, stretched her back, and walked to the sideboard where she kept her keepsakes. Nestled between her wedding photo and an old library card was a check, mounted and framed under glass. The first check she'd ever written to herself from the emergency fund, weeks ago, just after chemo began. Amount $50. Memo line, Freedom Fund. She stared at it now with something close to pride. The house was quieter than it used to be, but never empty. She no longer measured her value by footsteps in the hallway or names on birthday cards. She measured it in documents signed with resolve, in flowers that bloomed without spectators, in letters addressed to Ava that would last longer than she would. Just after 9, the doorbell rang. Melanie opened it slowly, expecting maybe Gloria, or perhaps no one at all. But it was Ava, smiling, out of breath. She held out a simple paper bag. "I saw this and thought of you," she said. Inside was a robe, soft flannel, deep purple. A tiny stitched label at the hem read, "If you ever need dropping off again, I'll wait." Melanie didn't say anything for a moment. She just reached for her granddaughter and pulled her into the quietest, strongest hug she'd given in years. That night, Melanie updates the trust's final note. Legacy, chosen. Heir, confirmed. Then sets it inside a sealed envelope marked, "To be opened if they ask who mattered." "They sent me home alone. I delivered my legacy by hand." The ballroom wasn't grand, but it tried to be. Linen tablecloths, pale roses in glass vases, a podium near a makeshift stage. The sign behind the microphone read, "Annual Women's Cancer Survivors Brunch." Melanie stood near the back at first, her flannel robe replaced with a charcoal gray blazer she hadn't worn since library retirements were still happening in person. Gloria gave her a thumbs up from the coffee table, 2 rows in, flanked by women with pins shaped like forget-me-nots. She hadn't spoken in front of a crowd in years. She hadn't needed to, but when the organizer read her name, Melanie Rivers, published author and survivor, the room offered applause that wasn't tentative. It was warm, familiar, the sound of women who had also walked into too many rooms alone. She made her way to the podium slowly but steady, cane in one hand, a small cream envelope in the other. "Thank you," she began, voice clear but low, just enough tremble to remind the room she hadn't always been this upright. She looked out over the tables, round faces, round plates, round memories being stitched back together. "I thought the illness would be the hardest part," she said, but it wasn't. The silence after was. The room stilled. I was sent home after surgery in a lift. No family at the door, no warm lights, just a soup can in a gift bag and a voicemail that said, "Hope it's nothing serious." She paused. It was. Some women exhaled sharply. Others reached for napkins. "But healing?" Melanie continued. "Healing is louder. It's chosen family on night shifts. It's root beer floats with someone who stayed. It's writing your own obituary before they try to do it for you, and changing the ending." The applause came slowly at first, then full. A woman near the buffet clapped first, then others followed. One woman stood, then another. Melanie stepped down without lingering, her cane tapping softly on the polished floor. Outside, Ava waited beside the car. She leaned against the passenger door, coat unzipped despite the cold. "Well?" she asked. "I said it all," Melanie replied. "Maybe not loudly, but clearly." Ava opened the door, helped her in, then walked around to the driver's side. On Melanie's lap sat the cream envelope. Its seal was waxed shut. The words across the front, in her own cursive, read, "Probate Clerk, Final Estate Trust." They didn't drive to a law office or a post office. They drove to the old municipal building, red brick and cracked sidewalks. Melanie insisted on walking the last half block. Ava carried her cane just in case. "I want to feel it," Melanie had said. "One last delivery, on my own legs." Inside the lobby, the clerk smiled without recognition and pointed to the intake slot behind the plexiglass partition. Melanie stepped forward slowly. Her fingers hovered a second longer than necessary. Then she dropped the envelope in. Soft thud. No fanfare. But she exhaled like she'd been holding it for years. Back in the car, she leaned her head against the window. "Done?" Ava asked gently. Melanie nodded. "Sealed. Filed. Protected. No one's rewriting a thing." They rode home, mostly in silence, the kind that didn't need repair. That evening, Melanie lit a fire and tucked herself beneath her robe, the one Ava had bought. She watched the flames reflect off the framed check on the mantel. Next to it sat a small wooden box labeled, "To be opened if they ask who mattered." Inside the sealed letter, "Legacy, chosen. Heir, confirmed." She didn't feel vengeful. She felt complete. Outside, the wind moved the porch chimes into a soft, certain melody. She didn't brace. She listened. And when the fire settled into low orange and Ava called from the kitchen, "Tea?" Melanie rose without hesitation. This time I walked out of it, alone by choice.